Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tyndale House podcast. This is another of our Meet the Reader interviews, where we talk to people who are here studying or researching in the Tyndale House Library. Some of those are here for a short time, some of them are here for a very long time. And Dani Treweek is with us from Australia at the moment. And how long are you here with us for?
I'm here from 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
I'm halfway through my 4-week stint.
Okay, great. So let's start by finding out a bit more about you. Who are you? Where have you come from?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Those kinds of questions.
Yeah, well, you gave the game away and probably my accent did too. So I've come quite a long way from Australia, though, you know, we're used to anywhere being quite a long way away from us.
That's true.
So I'm from Sydney, born and bred there. I grew up as a Christian in Sydney, went to Moore Theological College and did my Bachelor of Divinity there. Worked as a women's minister in a church in Sydney for almost 7 years and was ordained as an Anglican deacon before I very unexpectedly in my plans for life, but not so much in God's plans for me, ended up doing a PhD, expecting actually that I would do that and go back into parish-based ministry, working predominantly with women. But that hasn't been God's plan so far. So I now spend... I'm a bit of an eclectic kind of girl. I work 2 days a week for the Sydney Anglican Diocese as the Diocesan Research Officer. So that means I work with a few of the boards and committees and individuals doing some research and writing for their projects. And I direct a ministry called Single Minded. I write books and articles and speak on podcasts and manage to fill my time up with lots of things that when someone says, "What do you do with your time?" I think, "Oh, I don't know. What do I do?" But I honestly, there's a lot of it. So yeah.
Great. That's very good. So how did you go then from being a women's minister to doing unexpectedly doing a PhD?
Yeah. Not unexpected in the sense I've always been a bit of an academic person, but I had never any intention of I was probably at some point going to do a master's or something like that. I did a 4-year degree, which kind of effectively gave me a master's back in the day.
And then you accidentally signed up for a PhD.
Accidentally. Yeah, what happened was I had been encouraged for a number of years by a few people, one in particular who was on the faculty at Moore College when I was studying there, to write a book on singleness.
Right.
And after sort of 6.5 years in my ministry position, we'd had a really big year. Our senior minister had left to go on the mission field. We sort of had a year of looking for another senior minister. I was at that point the oldest and most experienced member of the staff team. It was a big year, and at the end of that, I kind of could see the wall approaching, and I thought, okay, now might be the time for me to say, all right, let's see what God has in store next, but take 6 months off to write this book that I was going to write on singleness.
Yeah, right.
Within 3 weeks of making that decision, I'd signed up to a PhD. So 6 months turned to 4 years. Right. But the reason for that was I thought I could write a book on singleness. It would probably be okay, but I didn't want to just produce a book on singleness that wasn't actually going to be faithful and thoughtful and a blessing and resource for the church.
Yes.
So I thought I needed to do the hard yards. Particularly because I had a particular angle I wanted to explore. Right. And I wanted to make sure that angle was actually orthodox and biblical and faithful. So it ended up being a PhD.
I had a very similar experience of starting to write a book and then a few weeks in thinking that this would be fine, but this actually is going to need an awful lot more work for it to be what I want it to be. And also did a PhD.
There you go.
So I know exactly that kind of process. So there was a particular thing you said you wanted to look at. What? Yeah. Tell us about that.
So I wanted to think, I'm single myself. I've never been married. I was, working in a church with lots of women and lots of single women, whether never married or widowed or divorced. Right. Lots of pastoral theological issues coming up and personally trying to wrestle through it myself. And so singleness was sort of on the agenda for me. I wanted to think theologically about it so I could also think pastorally. But back in Moore College in a third-year ethics lecture, that particular lecturer, Andrew Cameron, who went on to become my PhD supervisor, kind of just dropped this bombshell that I'd never heard before, which was he started just giving a bit of a head nod to the eschatological vision of singleness, and particularly if Jesus is correct, and let's assume he is because he's Jesus, that none of us are going to be married to each other in eternity, from Matthew chapter 22. What does that mean for not being married in the overlap of the ages here and now? So that was the angle. But I had not heard anyone, apart from that lecturer, ever talk about it. Hence me thinking, if I'm going to write a book on this, I should probably do the hard yards and make sure it's not just a case of wishful thinking. And the thing that I discovered pretty quickly, actually, was that the early church were all over this, this eschatological view of not being married in some weird and wacky ways, as they often are prone to do. I'm sure they'd say the same about us. But I was stunned at just how deeply eschatologically formed their thinking was. And also, really, I mean, to put it quite frankly, how we kind of lost a lot of that at the time of the Reformation. And so my thesis and then the book that came out of that was a theological retrieval of an eschatological vision of singleness for the church today.
Yeah, right. That's very interesting. I think we often assume that singleness was quite a rare thing in the ancient world, and we had an interview maybe last year with Barry Danilak about his book on how much singleness there was, which
and particularly amongst men.
In
which
Corinth, was a real surprise.
That's right.
So when you're talking about the early church and how they were all over this eschatologically, they were talking about singleness in eschatological terms, or rather than just being generally eschatological in the.
Well, I think they were generally eschatological. I think. We are very comfortable in our 21st century Western world. I mean, perhaps becoming a little less so at the moment with the craziness that's going on around the globe. But we think as Christians today, certainly I can feel very much at home here. I think, I'm talking in sort of sweeping generalizations here, but I think the early church had a more insightful view of the fact that this world is actually not our ultimate home. And for many of them, at least early on, I think a lot of them were thinking, particularly in the singleness and marriage sense of, what we're looking for is a return to the garden rather than the new city that's awaiting us. But it was very much formed for them by thinking about this kind of return to perfection post the fall. Still, I mean, marriage was normative statistically. And really, singleness is a modern word. They were using language like virginity, particularly. Celibacy was a bit of a later development, but virginity was kind of the key one for men and women. And it really tended to be the kind of male urban elites, Christians who could pursue a lifetime of virginity or singleness or celibacy or whatever we call it, because they had the economic, financial, social freedom to be able to do that in a way that the everyday, ordinary, common Christian probably didn't. Particularly in a historical context where marriages were essentially arranged for you. And they were arranged for the sake not just of you, but your household and your community. So,
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Wow. So what kind of surprises were you finding in the
well, the thing that really
the process
shocked me and I really had to grapple with, and this is kind of one of the weird and wacky things, was pre-Augustine. That's how we say it in Australia. I don't. How do you say it?
That's fine.
Augustine. Excellent. Whenever I'm in America, I have to remember Augustine and First Corinthians rather than 1 Corinthians, and so on and so forth. But pre him, by and large, and even he in his early ministry had a post-lapsarian view of marriage. So a lot of the early fathers. So what that meant was that they typically saw marriage and certainly sex as a reality that came into human existence after the fall, as a concession to the fall and particularly to death. now that death is a factor, procreation really, really matters continually.
Right.
And so that I hadn't, not really engaged with before. So Augustine, he came to change his mind, and that really was the turning point.
Okay, right.
Eventually sort of for, Western theology after that point. But so you can see if marriage and sex are post-lapsarian realities, then you can understand why an eschatological view of kind of a return to perfection in many of their minds meant a return to virginity as what humanity was initially designed for.
Right.
So that was, seeing, it wasn't so much the content of their eschatological vision that I was just floored by. It was the fact that it was so eschatologically driven through their own framework.
Yes, that's very interesting. Yes, that does strike me as being a bit wacky.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that is fascinating. So what else were you engaging with? You were not just looking at the Church Fathers, presumably you were looking at biblical texts too. So
a little bit, yeah. So because it was a theological retrieval, I really was. I'm a bit of a mix of systematic theology, biblical theology, historical theology, exegesis. I'm kind of all wrapped into one.
Okay.
And so the PhD thesis and then the book that came out of that, The Meaning of Singleness, sort of covers all of those disciplines.
Right.
So I did do historical theology and went through to the medieval church as well, which was really interesting. Though I started with a cultural analysis of looking at actually in the last sort of couple of hundred years societally and then in the church, how have we come to where we're at now and are thinking about marriage and singleness, particularly from an evangelical perspective.
Right.
And I sort of use that as the opportunity to say, all right, this is where we're at. Now let's go back and see what our forebears kind of grappled with all of this. And then let's try and retrieve what is faithful and important from them for now. So that involved, I did do a reception history of two different passages. So Matthew chapter 22, the no marriage in heaven passage, I figured that was probably going to be pretty important.
I guess it might be.
Yes, and really very uniform discourse. The thing that caused the most kind of controversy there was the angels comment. You'll be like the angels in heaven. There was a lot of kind of, what does that mean? Are we becoming angels? Are we angels now? So, but in terms of the no, resurrected people will not be married to each other, there was very little dispute about that until Victorian England.
Okay. We should probably just explain by reception history, we're looking at how a text is read down through history.
Yes, that's right.
So there's a consistent view about how no marriage in heaven until the Victorian period.
Yes.
What happens then?
Well, interestingly, it's probably slightly before the Victorian period, it was paved the way by the Industrial Revolution, which really changed the whole nature of the household. The household went from being a place of primary production where men and women, mothers and fathers, children, extended kin lived together and worked together, an intimate relationship, but as a unit that then actually was kind of the cog in a broader community who all worked and lived and socialized with each other. The Industrial Revolution took production out of the home, put it into the factories, and so I'm, condensing things a lot here, but essentially I left a vacuum in the home. What holds the home, the household together? And so intimacy and relationships became kind of the glue that held the household together, which also meant it became much more privatized. It was a combination of societal and theological developments that just kind of then paved the way for the mid-20th century and kind of peak golden age of the nuclear middle class family post-World War II. Before, right on its heels, was the sexual revolution and every other revolution that happened in the last half of last century. And here we are today.
Yes. So we're in a situation where we live in a society that's increasingly fragmented. There's rapidly rising numbers of single people. And the church doesn't really have the full resources at its fingertips to be able to help them because we've bought into a Victorian vision of family life.
Yes, and a late 20th century evangelical vision of family life as well. Yeah. And I think it's complex because when we do say, well, marriage rates are dropping in the world around us, that doesn't necessarily mean singleness rates are massively rising, because what is it to be single?
Okay.
Certainly from a Christian perspective, we might have a definition. From a societal perspective, it could be a completely different thing. And so even the terminology is very difficult to navigate. But certainly, as the church, I don't think that we actually have a flourishing, life-giving vision of what it is to be unmarried, to be able to offer, not simply to those outside our communities who we're wanting to actually say, hey, Jesus has got what you need. He gives you life to the full.
Yes.
Unless you're single, then you kind of, oh, well, that's a shame, isn't it? But also to the divorcees in our churches, to the widows and widowers, to those who have never married, to those who experience same-sex attraction. There's a whole lot of people in our pews who I think are largely invisible to us in their situations a lot of the time. Yeah.
Yes. So let's dig into that passage a little bit more. And so what is Jesus really saying there?
Well, I mean, we have to read it in the context, which is it's the Sadducees trying to trick him into admitting that this whole resurrection thing he's been talking about actually is a load of nonsense. Jesus, as he manages to do, you're wrong, he says. They kind of give that hypothetical example of the woman who marries 7 brothers. They all die. Which is she going to be married to in the resurrection? And Jesus's point is, you haven't understood the resurrection age. You haven't understood. It's not just a repeat of this life. It's a transcending fulfillment of this life. And actually there in that passage, we could go to a passage like Ephesians chapter 5 and say, well, the reason that there isn't human marriage in the resurrection age is because the ultimate marriage has come.
Right.
And the shadow has been replaced by the reality.
Yes.
In that passage, and it comes out more clearly, I think, in Luke's version of this passage, it's actually, I think, got to do with the fact that there's no more death in the resurrection age. The new creation will be filled with every person whose name is written in the book of life.
Yes.
There is no more cycle of death and decay and birth and death and decay.
Yes.
And so actually procreation is not going to be certainly what we would understand it to be, a reality in the new creation.
Yes.
And so where there is no procreation, there is no need for sexual relationship between men and women and marriage, particularly when the relationship that will exist between men and women there is that of brother and sister in Christ who are fully known and fully loved.
Yes.
And there's no one unique exclusive relationship between a man and a woman.
Right.
We all share in the same sibling relationship with each other.
Right.
And so, the no procreation, no sex thing is probably what Jesus meant by the angel thing. They'll be like the angels.
Yeah, right.
That seems to be the case there. But he's certainly not saying that we will become angels. We will be resurrected human beings.
Yes.
Still, I'm absolutely convinced male and female, but our maleness and our femaleness there will be primarily lived out through our experience as sons and daughters of God and brothers and sisters of each other. And that's why my new book that's coming out, which is a popular level book, the title of it is Single Ever After. Because the reality is, as the church, the body of Christ together, we will be the bride of Christ.
Right.
But as individuals, the relationships that we will share within the body is as those who are single in the sense of being unmarried.
Yes, right.
It's the book that I wanted to write. This is a book that I did a PhD to write.
Yes, right.
So,
So how does that change the way that we think about our relationships within the church now? How do we think differently about marriage and relationships with other people in the church, singles and relationships with married couples, all of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what does it do to us?
Well, I think the first thing to say, and I feel like this is really important to always say, is that we have a tendency on so many topics, but including this one of marriage and singleness, to approach it as a bit of a zero-sum game, where if you're going to honour marriage, you have to dishonour singleness. And so I know that a lot of people, because I've heard this anecdotally, haven't read my earlier book and probably won't read this book because they're going to assume that a book on singleness is anti-marriage.
Right.
It's actually not at all. Part of my desire is not just to actually help us rediscover a faithful theology of singleness, but also to kind of rescue marriage theologically from so much that we and our society has kind of loaded upon it that I actually think is hurting marriages and married people in a lot of ways. So it's not a zero-sum game. The Bible actually, 1 Corinthians 7, Paul's able to say, being married is good, being single is good. Get on and serve Jesus, whichever one you're at. It's a gift, go for it. And so that's, big picture, I think, the first thing that we need to look at, which then means that our churches are family for those of us who are unmarried just as much as they are places where married Christians belong. And, I think the eschatological vision, so in Single Ever After, the first chapter the subtitle is Co-Specialists in Eternity, in that both marriage and singleness are intended by God to direct our eyes to different realities or different aspects of the reality that await us in eternity.
Right.
And so that means that the church, the family of God, needs married people to be living out their marriages publicly and fruitfully, but they also need single Christians in them to be doing the same in their singleness to help us get the kind of, binocular vision of eternity and the new creation and relationships in that age. Yeah.
So what should an unmarried person be seeing in a marriage that helps them to understand the new creation? What should a married person be seeing in an unmarried person that helps them see the new creation?
Well, I mean, as a single person, I ought to be looking at my friends' marriages and being able to see just imperfect, of course, but wonderful glimpse of the intimacy that we as the church will experience with Jesus Christ. The love, the depth of affection and connection that the church's relationship with Jesus is the ultimate one flesh relationship.
Yes.
And so I want my married friends to be able to help me be excited about my opportunity and hope, confident hope and assurance of being able to participate as a member of the church, as a part of the body in that, which again means, it doesn't mean everything about someone's marriage ought to be public. Of course that doesn't mean, but it also doesn't mean that marriages kind of should be hidden away behind the household door. We actually need to live them out publicly with each other if they're going to serve that important purpose. On the flip side, I want my married friends to be able to look at me as someone who doesn't share an exclusive relationship of marriage with a man, but instead all of my relationships are currently with other Christians, the brother and sister relationship that we will have for eternity.
Oh, it's great.
I love that. So great. It is. It's a wonderful vision, isn't it? I want you to be able to look at me and kind of be able to go, oh, that's exciting. Yeah. As I look at how Dani is relating as an unmarried woman, that's a little glimpse of what it's going to be like. Again, imperfect as yet, but a little glimpse of what's awaiting us as brothers and sisters for eternity.
Yeah. Sometimes you hear people kind of suggest that whichever state you're in, the grass is always greener. If you're married, you're always kind of looking somewhat enviously at the freedom that single people have and the number of friendships that they can enjoy, and vice versa. But actually, from what you're saying, there's a sense in which that's somewhat right. I mean, obviously, it gets overlain by our sinfulness and so on. But there is a sense in which we should be, then, as you're saying, we should be looking and saying, oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
A brilliant vision. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the reality is that a lot of singles are very lonely.
Yeah.
But also a lot of married people are very lonely. And I think, that's partly because in marriages we've kind of said, well, you don't really need friendship if you've got the ultimate friend in your spouse.
Yeah.
And so marriages don't often breathe in the oxygen of other relationships as much as they should.
Right.
But for singles, it can also be a case of it can be harder to make friends the older you get, and the less we value friendship, the less the more that happens.
Yes.
But also in a context, both in the church and society, where we've kind of for decades, if not centuries, have said the ultimate form of intimacy, the one that really matters, is in marriage. That can leave many singles kind of feeling like, well, anything else is just a kind of pity prize. The dregs of what I don't have.
Yes.
And so that's again why I think we need to reformulate our theology of not just marriage and singleness, but relationships and community.
Yes. We've come to see intimacy as meaning sexual relationship, haven't we? And
that's right.
And that's not right.
That's right. Well, that's right. I mean, it's definitely intended by God to be a very unique and important and particular form of intimacy.
Yes.
But even, I use the language, my sexual nature as a woman is about far more than just being a wife.
Right.
Or being a mother, and so relating to a husband sexually in that way, or living out, my femaleness as a mother, because actually our sexual natures have been given to us by God, so that I as a woman live as a woman in this world. I relate to other women as a woman. I relate to men as a woman. You're relating to me right now as a man.
Yes.
And that in eternity, it's going to be better than we can imagine it will be.
Right.
But we will still retain our male or female sexual nature and bodies in some way or another.
Right.
But we won't be actually living those out in the context of marriage and sex and parenthood the way we are in this creation, which I actually think means that there is a much bigger, grander picture for our sexual nature than we give it or yet fully understand.
That's very helpful, because often we think that our sexual nature is so much a part of who we are. And of course, that's part of why we have such big debates about sex and sexuality and gender at the moment, because we do feel that our sexual nature is really core to our identity. And so then the question has been, but what does that mean? If God has created us as sexual beings, is he going to radically change us as beings for the new creation? But what you're arguing then is that no, we're not.
No.
But that sexual nature is expressed in a different way.
Yeah, it's going to be fulfilled. Perfectly fulfilled in ways that we can't quite yet grasp.
Right.
But it does mean that our bodies and our sexual natures, our maleness and our femaleness are really, really important. They're not something we can just shrug off.
Yes,
they're actually intrinsic to what it means for you and me to have been made by God in his image.
Right.
And it also gives, I think, a great hope to those who do struggle with their sexual nature in one way or another, to know that God has promised that there's going to be an eternity, not just when they're not going to experience that anymore, as great as that is going to be, but when they'll actually be able to be the man or the woman that is their telos, is their end, is their ultimate purpose.
Yeah.
And they'll be doing that in relationship to God as either his son or daughter, and in relationship to each other as either their brother or sister. Yeah,
that's very good. Are there other resources of Scripture that can help us to reflect on these things, or does it all rest on in marriages? There'll be no. Well, I think in the new creation there'll be no marriage.
Oh, I think, the eschatological vision, yes, it's Matthew chapter 22 and the parallel passages are kind of the fulcrum there where we get, but I think you can read that within the broader theological context of the eschatological purpose of marriage, Jesus's resurrection body, all sorts of things there. But the other passage really that kind of links eschatology and singleness is 1 Corinthians 7 at a few different points. And my book, which now will already be out, Single Ever After, kind of actually does a dive into 3 different parts of 1 Corinthians 7 that I think that we have we've misunderstood each of them in very significant ways for a very long time. And one of those is verses 29 to 35, where there is very clearly Paul's ethic of singleness and marriage there is totally eschatologically framed. It's all about the present form of the world passing away, the time being short.
Of course.
And so there is an impetus very clearly in Scripture. Even, you think of the passage in Isaiah where Isaiah says that the Lord is going to give eunuchs a name better than sons and daughters.
Right.
Now, that is an eschatological promise. So we really do see the unmarried life and eschatology closely linked in Scripture. When it gets talked about, it's almost always got that attached to it in one way or another.
Yes. Wow. That's very interesting. Actually, you're not here at Tyndale House working on that, are you?
No.
What's your next project?
I'm working on a commentary on 1 and 2 Thessalonians for the Hodder Bible Commentary series, which actually, eschatology.
Well, I was wondering whether there was an eschatological impulse that took you in that direction.
I was asked to write it and I said, okay, I guess I will. But, as I spend time with it, it is very clear that, I'm only still in 1 Thessalonians, but certainly having read 2 Thessalonians, Paul's very much concerned right through that again with eschatology and what it is to live now in light of the absolute assurance that Christ is returning, and the resurrection is on the horizon.
Yeah. And it's not only in terms of relationships that we're not doing that. We're failing to do that in so many aspects of discipleship, aren't we, in the modern world?
I think we just think this is home.
Yeah.
We're settled in, where the early church was probably like, why isn't Jesus back yet? Come on, we're living on the edge of this.
Yeah.
We've gone completely the other direction. Oh, we know theoretically it's going to happen, but it's not going to happen now. So why would I kind of, be anticipating that?
Yes. And please not before I've done these 27 things.
Frankly, if Jesus wanted to come back before I had to finish the commentary, that would be okay. I love it, but I won't be upset if he comes back and nobody needs to read any commentaries anymore because they've got the Word of God right there with them. So
that seems fair enough. Dani, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I look forward to reading the book. Thank you very much for joining us on the Tyndale House podcast again. Remember, if you only listen to these, you can watch them on YouTube as well. Subscribe to the channel there. Reviews and ratings and telling other people about it help other people to get to know about the podcast and interviews like this. So please tell your friends, pass it on. And thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.